My name's Malcolm Connell. Many years ago I took an interest in Pan Mill. 3 times a year we have open days at Pan Mill. These are run by the High Wycombe Society and are basically a fundraising event and an event to publicise the High Wycombe Society and Pan Mill itself and any other local societies that wish to come down. The idea is to have the mill running and demonstrate milling and to keep the heritage of the site alive. The history of the mill goes back at least 1,000 years. We know that there were 6 mills in Wycombe, mentioned in the Domesday Book in 1086. Through a process of elimination and other research, Pan Mill has been found to be one of those 6 mills. Pan Mill Restoration Group was formed round about 1975, I think. What happened was that the council bought the mill from the last owners with an intention of putting a road past the back of it and across the Rye. Now there was a major outcry against that, and the Rye Preservation Group contested the plans all the way up to the House of Lords, in fact. The wheat that we use comes from a local farm, a hill farm at Stokenchurch. We get it from there because they've been very helpful, and they sell it to us at a realistic rate. We get it from local farms in order to keep the whole issue local as possible. The wheat we use is a traditional bread making wheat. The type is either Malacca or Cordial or whatever he happens to be producing that year. He obviously doesn't grow for us, he grows for the main markets, so we take what there is. The milling process is fairly simple and straightforward. The mill that we've got at the moment is fairly small and doesn't have any bulk storage facilities, so we have to bypass the traditional method of running wheat from the main storage floor down to the stone floor. That's the floor where the actual grinding stones, mill stones, are. So we ladle it into a hopper by hand. The hopper holds a header quantity of wheat, which then drops out at a controlled rate into a sloping board. This is called the shoe, and that regulates how much wheat actually goes down into the grindstones, the millstones. The slope of the board can be varied by the miller from the milling position on the ground floor, and he can raise or lower the end of the board so that a different amount of wheat goes in. The millstones themselves that we use for producing flour were made back in the 1920s possibly by a company in London. They're composed of what's called French burr and are made together from smaller pieces. They're not just a very large millstone. Now it's the top stone which is actually being driven by the water wheel out the back through the gears, and the bottom stone, the bed stone, stays stationary. The gap between the stones is somewhat less than the width of a grain of wheat, but of course the stones never touch. they're held apart by the wheat and flour that's within them. The wheat is picked up and is first of all cut by sharp edges that are cut into the surface of the millstones. These grooves are generally cut by hand using a tool called a bill. The grooves in the stone act as scissors, and because of the angles that they're at, they tend to move the wheat back towards the centre of the stone. However, the rotation of the top stone, the runner stone, moves the flour outwards and just drops into the sack on the ground floor. The stones themselves weigh around 3/4 of a ton, and the gearing rotates them at about 100 to 120 revolutions a minute. The flour that we produce is a whole wheat flour. It contains everything that's in the grain of wheat. So if there's any bits of chaff, the outer husk, the shell, the kernel, wheat germ, the starch, all gets milled into the flour that comes out of the spout and is then bagged up ready for sale. This is a whole wheat flour, say very good for you, and is quite sought after, very good for making brown bread. We only sieve out just the biggest bits that are not required, and then bag up the flour and sell it as a whole wheat flour. The mill is owned by Wycombe Council, but is managed by the High Wycombe Society. You can look at the High Wycombe Society website, which is www.highwycombe.org.uk, and the mill itself has its own website, www.panmill.org.uk.